Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. Hey folks, welcome back to the podcast and to a very special mini-series specifically on structural firefighting and tactical ventilation. Now, a couple of years ago, a long-term listener of the podcast heard our episodes with John McDonough and Karel Lambert. As a quick recap for anyone new to the podcast, these were episodes 113, Non-Negotiables and Shared Expectations with John McDonough, and episode 163, Ventilation, Personal Development and Happy Firefighters with Karel Lambert. So if you haven't listened to them, maybe jump back and listen to them before getting into this mini-series. But getting back to our long-term listener, this is one of the very few people that not only listens to and supports the podcast, but actually deploys the things that they are learning. Incredibly resourceful, diligent and driven individual is Watch Manager Lewis White. Now, Lewis currently serves in Lancashire and he's a training manager in charge of their breathing apparatus, SCBA, for our non-UK listeners. And he took it upon himself to reach out to both these individuals, had a number of calls online, actually travelled out to do a course of one of them, then decided to bring all of this learning back, originally to share with his own service, which is like the perfect analogy for everything that we hope with the information and experts and guests that we have on the podcast. But he then went one step further, but then also went one step further and organised an IFE CPD on structural firefighting and tactical ventilation with John McDonough and Karel Lambert, inviting them to the UK to run a 2-day course. So massive credit goes to Lewis, to Lancashire, and also a special thanks to their senior leadership team and Justin Johnson, who's the Chief Fire Officer. He came down and joined us on one of the 2 days. Came and had a chat with myself, which is really nice. Justin's actually going to be retiring soon, so keep your eyes out there for a future episode perhaps. But this was just a great example of where an individual has gone above and beyond to find these nuggets of information, to find the most up-to-date studies, data, and experiential knowledge on structural firefighting and tactical ventilation, and try and bring all those learnings back to his own service and back to the UK Fire and Rescue Service. They say a rising tide raises all the ships. And a really bad old habit that I've personally seen with some people in the fire service is that they hoard knowledge. They guard it. They think it's that little thing that makes them special, makes them the subject matter expert in their service. You know what, if it's useful, put it out there. It's the whole point of the podcast. So in this mini-series, you'll be listening to episodes on identifying non-negotiables of structural firefighting. We'll outline leadership principles for training and operations. We'll help you understand the importance of knowing the spread, the variables which affect fireground operations. We're going to look at suppression and extinguishing methods, and then Karel's going to take us through some ventilation tactics for training and operations, and finally we'll finish with a roundtable with a couple of the attendees, Karel, John, Lewis, and other members of Lancashire Fire and Rescue Service. So it's a real privilege to bring this to you. It's something we want to do a lot more of. We've spoke to a couple of other services and brigades in the UK who also would like to look to replicate something like this. Now, just to give some context on these episodes, these were recorded during presentations, so there are presentations that go with these. And you can find all these presentations for free in the link just under each episode. So if you click the bit that says find associated presentation here, click that bit, you'll be able to access the presentation for free. So then hopefully you can listen along to this and go through the presentation and connect the dots. But even if you don't want to download the presentation, both John and Karel are practice speakers and there's so much to take away from this audio platform as well. So massive thanks and credit once again go to Lancashire Fire and Rescue Service, to Lewis and all of the team, the Fireground Ops, a big shout out to Mo, who helped out with a lot of the communications and the recording of this. And then finally, a big thanks to all the attendees. We had SCBA and fire behaviour experts and instructors from all over the UK, some fantastic questions, some great networking, and some great conversation during the breaks around how we can look to implement a lot of this stuff to bring the UK Fire and Rescue Service knowledge and awareness in these two disciplines back to a higher level. So I hope you enjoy this mini-series. Today's first one is an introduction from both of our speakers. So again, you can go back and listen to both those episodes, but you also get a short introduction on John and Karel, and then we're going to be releasing a new episode on this every other day. Hope that all makes sense. So that's the plan. Hope you take a lot away from these episodes, and without further ado, I'll introduce our first speaker of the day, which was John McDonough. I'll see you on the other side.
Understand my Australian accent. I'm getting a sense that it sort of works the other way now. I'm trying to get my ear for some of the English that I'm hearing, but please ask any questions whatsoever. This is just an opportunity for me to see how you guys do things, and the Australian Fire Service is really the British Fire Service of 20 years ago in a sense. So everything is very familiar to me. We call a branch and so on. But I really want you to challenge also anything I'm about to say. If it doesn't make sense with the way you do things or the way you see things, here's a perfect opportunity to have that discussion. And what I can do, though, is show you how we're sort of dealing with some of the issues that we have on the fire ground and in training some of our firefighters. I'm from New South Wales, so we've got a population of about 8 million people. If you've been to Australia, sort of it's a large area. We have large fire services, state-run fire services, state-run police services, and ambulance services. So none of the fire services in Australia do paramedics or ambulance. So Sydney, we've got about 8 million people in New South Wales and 5.2 live in Sydney. So we do have the bush and the outback, but we're, I think, the most urbanised country in the world. Everyone lives in a big city, normally on the coast, generally. So there's a bit of a picture of Sydney. So what's it, 12,000 square kilometres? And the state itself, I always say when I'm in Belgium, Belgium fits in New South Wales, let's say 23 times or something. So, but we have this tyranny of distance. How do we provide training and consistency across our whole state for all of our firefighters? We've got about nearly 7,000 firefighters serving at 335 stations. We have full-time firefighters and retained as well. So basically, Sydney itself, we have about 100 fire stations. They're all full-time. But as you start to move out of the greater Sydney area, if we have a town of more than 25,000, it'll have a full-time station, but we start to get more retained stations as well. And with all the sort of issues is probably the wrong word, but in our modern society, we're finding it very difficult to get our on-call firefighters and to train them and so on. Whereas we didn't seem to have the same sort of issues 20, 30 years ago. So certainly modern society, whether there's a, is making it very difficult. People don't normally work near home. People will travel many hours to work and so on. So we're having trouble getting attendance at some of our on-call stations. Fire Rescue New South Wales is probably the busiest through population in terms of Australian fire services. We pretty much look the same, modern gear and so on. That wasn't always the case. It wasn't until I really left Australia in early 2000 that I saw that other fire services are better protected and have better equipment. That's something we can talk about in a moment. I joined the fire service in 1987 as a 22-year-old. I'd never said the word fire brigade until I was 22, and I found out they had 4 days on, 4 days off. Anyone else like that? Come on, be honest. No? Okay. That's me when I was young and happy in the lion tamer's suit. So in 1988, we were still wearing the same uniform that we were wearing not only in 1941, except for the brass helmets. They left in 1963. I believe you guys would have had a similar helmet in the British Fire Services, and probably till a similar date, I imagine. But I remember at that fire station, Lake Cove Fire Station, I must have been on the duty. I'm in the lion tamers. There was a picture on the wall from 1916, and once again, wearing exactly the same uniform. Did it seem weird at the time? No, because that's what firefighters wore. But obviously no moisture, just a woolen jacket, top boots, hose and nozzle spanner, the big belt. Sometimes we had gloves, sometimes we didn't. We didn't get a flash hood until 2002. But if that's what you're used to, that's what you're used to.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. Now, we all know the working environment of a firefighter is filled with challenges. We face serious risks on the job, such as heat exhaustion, burns, physical and mental stress, and we frequently come into contact with high levels of toxic chemicals. Now, I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together.
2002, I went to Sweden. How did I end up in Sweden? I read a book by Paul Grimwood, Fog Attack. Some of you guys may have read Fog Attack. Came out, I think, in 94 or maybe 96. If you haven't read it, I can give you a PDF of it. It was really just an investigation of fire services all around the world, a comparison. But there were a lot of chapters on the news firefighting coming out of Sweden and Scandinavia. So I read it. There was a chance for a trip overseas in my organisation. I'd been in the job for 15 years. I was a young station officer. I thought I knew what I was doing. I'd been to lots of fires and so on. And I went to Sundo and spent time with Nisse Bergström, the guy you can see there. And for once, I put on decent fire kit, the Swedish RB90 stuff. You sort of pull the hood over, like Kenny in South Park. And my mind was blown in a number of ways. Firstly, pulling this hood over and protecting the most important part of me as well as I protected the rest of my body was something different. I watched Nisse Bergström with his flash hood on, and we're just about to put our BA mask on, and I'm going, at some point he must pull that back so that he puts the mask against his face. And he didn't. He just plonked it straight on, straight over the flash hood. So my reaction, my critical thinking skills were not well established, and I had to say something. I said something like, it wasn't even a question, it was sort of, that must leak. Because my whole career I'd been taught that if that wasn't touching my face, my BA mask would leak. And of course, when in Rome, firstly, he said it is positive pressure. So even if it did leak, it's not a problem, but it didn't leak. So I put it on, mind blown again. I'm going to die. I'm now wearing my breathing apparatus differently. I plugged a radio into the Interspiro mask and had press to talk, and they'd had that for 20 years. And this is 20 years ago. So once again, we still don't have decent comms. So all of these things were just sort of expanding how I thought about the fire service and perhaps what I needed to do when I went back to Australia, where my job was to introduce this form of firefighting into my own organisation. After that visit to Sundo, I went to Devon and Cornwall and looked how the UK fire services, certainly in those two fire services, had introduced and made this Western or British, if you like, British Australian, to see how we should implement. And then I went back, and in 2003 we started our program. I thought, just to give you a bit of an insight, because during the whole day I'll keep on coming back to how we train our guys and the problems we've had introducing this. We started training instructors in 2003 and started training firefighters in 2004, in February 2004. So I've got some pictures of our props, and these props will be very similar, I imagine, to what's here. But we sort of have done a lot, evolved in certain areas. We have our demo attack cell. I'm sure most of you guys would be aware of what's happening in there. We've changed our cells quite a bit from the Swedish model. No top vents, very simple, just straight cells. We're very careful about how we arrange our fuel. And probably the biggest difference I see in how we operate these cells is we're constantly applying water to the fuel. And I think I've trained guys all around the world, Croatia, Hong Kong, Brazil, States, and everyone with live fire seems to burn with a lot of flame. In an environment where we're trying to teach them to cool gases, we don't seem to have the smoke. So that was a big problem we had to overcome as well, and I'll sort of talk a bit about that. Our other, and to do that, I thought the best way to do that, in 2010, I sent an email to Paul Grimwood, just to go back a step. In 2005, I was invited by Paul with Ed Harton and Sean Raffel to write 3D Firefighting. So I've got a long relationship with Paul Grimwood, from the first person I contacted to see where to go in Sweden to writing the book. But I sent a letter to Paul about where we were at after doing this for about 10 years. And I thought I'd take some excerpts from that letter. After some years of delivering CFBT, it became apparent that we were making robots. Robots that always did the same thing, very similar to the robots that we had previously produced for 100 years in the fire service. True, our new robot was different. After searching the world for the latest in robot technology, we had produced the Mark I short pulse robot. It was superior to the old robot, who wouldn't pulse at all. Unfortunately, despite our best intentions, we only developed the model robot to work well with little fires in little containers, and we were happy when they could do that well with little water and little hoses. We had installed lots of new circuitry packed with knowledge in the Mark I short pulsing robot, but forgot to solder the connection between all of this new knowledge and reality. So many of the new robots knew all the moves and techniques, but not how to apply them to all different fires. In fact, because of our training, we had hardwired them to act very strangely and inconsistently. Soon became apparent that some of the robots only used their new techniques if the fire was small and confined or if they saw flame above them. And other robots just ceased using the new techniques at all if the building was bigger than a shipping container. Now, some of you guys may have witnessed similar things. You may have had to evolve and try and deal with that yourselves. But this was definitely a problem with us after 10 years of doing what blew my mind in Sweden and coming back and trying to have better results on the fire ground.
In other news, this episode is brought to you in partnership with MSA Safety. Today we have them to thank for the improved firefighter safety through connectivity in their brand new connected firefighter system. At the center of the connected firefighter platform is the MSA M1 SCBA with telemetry. You can view battery life, air pressure, and estimated time remaining either independently on the M1 itself or from the Luna connected device screen. Also, still with the air status, alarm information, search status, and all of this provided to the incident command for confident decision making during the scene. That integrates straight in with the Luna system, which is a wireless all-in-one device creating an independent search and rescue network, providing edge detection, enhanced personal thermal imaging, while simplifying post-scene reporting and data retention. One of the key parts of the Luna is their FAST system, the Firefighting Assisting Search Technology. This combines directional and distance information with thermal imaging to help find separated teammates and decrease response time. It actually connects you to the other crews in the vicinity for a unified search during the time of mutual aid by instantly notifying the network of Luna devices when there is a downed crew member, allowing for a prompt search and rescue. All of this then plugs into the FireGrid system for cloud-based connectivity, real-time information, and data-driven decisions for the incident commander. It enables you to see the exact location of your firefighters on the scene. And it doesn't require you to be sat on the station. The MSA Hub then provides a wireless gateway straight to the cloud, enabling wireless on-scene data for local and remote incident command for additional eyes on the scene. MSA are truly taking massive strides in the future of improved firefighter safety through connectivity. MSA is dedicated to increasing safety in the fire service through technological advancements. Various feature enhancements, new products, partnerships, and integrations will provide additional capabilities readily accessible by products, software, and services in the brand new MSA connected firefighter platform. Now back to the show.
So some years ago, we took a long, hard look at our classic CFPT production line and admitted to ourselves that we were not making the firefighter we thought we were. Our firefighter was probably a little more sophisticated and a little bit more aware, but did this really translate into a safer, more effective firefighter on the fire ground? At first, I believed it to be so, but increasingly, I suspected it was not the case. So in the last 10 years, we made in a number of ways, a very concerted effort to try and change that in the way we trained, in the context we used, in the amount of water we used, and so on. So over the next 2 days, that's what I'd sort of like to talk about mostly, I suppose, and what it meant for us. So we then went to props where we actually flashed a fire over and looked at extinguishment. The early props were called flashover cells, but as you know, we never flashed them over. We just had fire growth and then we did some stuff. So we would take furniture, we would get our 2 to 3 megawatts and we would flash a fire over and we would have recruits attack that as they would a room fire. We found that valuable. In Belgium also, we have what we call our flashover cell and it flashes over. They can do an exterior attack on the top you can see, and they can advance into a room, into a hallway, and commence an indirect attack from inside as well. Once again, concentrating on what we thought all firefighters could do, extinguish, and the problem was just teaching them to gas cool, and this was left out of the equation. We then went to what we call the T cell, where we wanted to take the fire out of sight. We would have a hallway full of hot smoke, fed from the fire end, if you like, and we'd have search and rescue rooms on each side. Crews would attack the fire after making the journey, and then they would search under hot fire conditions. And in some ways, it was a no-no to put furniture inside CFPT cells. We put it in the search areas, but not the fuel end. And this replicates a rapid move down a hallway onto the fire, extinguish the fire, and then search. So once again, this was an important cell that we never had when we first started. We then went to our large volume cell because we were training guys to use more water Short pulses in some ways are only used rarely now in my fire service. It's all long pulses, if you want to use that terminology. Much more aggressive with our water in terms of our projection and how much we want to use inside a room. And to do that and to replicate a larger commercial fire, we built a large volume cell. Our first model, 12 years ago, was at that facility, but we then moved to an all-in-one prop with a new training center where it all sits inside a 3-section building with cold, warm, and hot areas, and the smoke is scrubbed. So we had the opportunity to Tetris all of those props I talked about into one prop and then place them inside a large warehouse, if you like, and then scrub the smoke. So that all sits inside and the smoke is scrubbed. Yep.
You say scrubbing the smoke.
Right. It's filtered, yes, for the environment. No, that's right, yeah. So none of the fire behaviour is affected. In Melbourne, in the was now Fire Rescue Victoria, they had a system built where they had 2 containers with an oxidizer in the middle, and it sort of sucked the smoke out and oxidized it. Unfortunately, if you're going to use real fire to teach fire behaviour, and the fire behaviour is being changed by the oxidizer and the ventilation, well, it sort of defeats the purpose, so they struggle. So the objective was whatever happens in the container is normal fire behaviour in an enclosure. Once it gets out into the larger area, it's scrubbed. It doesn't draw anything out. It relies on the buoyancy of the smoke to raise it up to the level at which it can enter into the system. And where these systems struggle is if the roof is too high, it doesn't have the density in the smoke. So you do get some residual smoke outside, yeah. So you normally just fix that by hooding the outside where the smoke first comes out. So we looked at different systems. It's just a cartridge paper system. So that's now been in operation for about eight or 9 years now, the new training facility. So once again, the warm area, so they can come straight out into that, and then the classroom area. We struggle a lot with the temperature outside, and we can't afford to stop the training, so it always involves cooling chairs with our forearms in water and misting fans to try and keep our biggest safety issue is heat stress, right? So we have a warm and cold area, and that just all sits inside that. So that's pretty much a bit of an insight into a bit of my career. I returned back to operations in February 2017 as a duty commander after spending about 15 years as a team leader of fire training. So I was lucky that the organisation essentially gave me carte blanche to design the program and trusted me to and we could move fairly rapidly and change if necessary. My other talk will be about my return back to operations as a duty commander and really looking at, well, how effective was this training when I'm sending guys into burning buildings again? So I had very much a vested interest in making sure they came out. So that's the other I'll talk about my non-negotiables and a few other things after morning tea. But there's just a bit of an insight about where I'm at the moment, what we developed, and there'll be, when we do some practical tomorrow, try and give an insight into how we control the fire behaviour inside the container rather than just letting it burn. If you're going to train to cool gases, we need thick smoke. We need to just see a little bit of flame. Anyone can see a lot of flame. I suspect in many cases I've seen around the place, we say we're gas cooling, but we're really flame cooling. Nothing wrong with flame cooling if you need to, but there's a difference between a thick smoke layer and just seeing a little bit of flame and reacting to it rather than a wall of flame. So, maybe we can talk about that as well. I'll hand over to Karel and he can tell you a bit about himself.
Ever heard the quote that true leaders are readers? Well, we believe this is true. Listeners often ask where we go to keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening in the sector globally. So there are a few key publications which I encourage you to go check out. Now, if you're looking for insights on disaster management, fire protection and firefighting, for us, we go to Asia Pacific Fire Magazine. And when you're looking for the latest on the Middle East fire protection industry and fire services, it's Gulf Fire Magazine. And our quarterly check-in is with International Firefighter Magazine, reporting to municipal, industrial and fire training professionals. Now, next Next up, and widely accepted to be the global voice for passive and active fire protection. This is a good one. It's International Fire Protection magazine. And finally, and perhaps the most relevant to our predominantly UK audience, I'd strongly suggest subscribing to UK Fire magazine, reporting to the United Kingdom fire protection industry and fire services. We're really excited to announce that after a long-standing relationship and mutual respect, we've now partnered with MDM Publishing, who bring you all of these essential publications. Because in a world of change, the learners shall inherit the earth, while the learned shall find themselves perfectly suited for a world that no longer exists. Eric Hoffer said that, and I believe he was right. So keep growing, keep learning, and keep yourself in the know and at the cutting edge of what's happening globally by dropping into the notes. And as a gift from the podcast, you can actually subscribe to any of these publications for free using the link in our notes. Now back to the show.
Let's introduce myself. I'm from Belgium. My mother tongue isn't English, so you'll hear that. But I suppose my English is better than your Dutch or French. I speak French too. So let's do this in English. And the idea of this small introduction is to tell you who I am, where I come from, what my background is. Louis asked me to tell something about leadership, and I think it's important to understand who I am and where I come from, to understand the concepts that I try to bring across. And in the afternoon, I will bring a lecture about different types of fire, and also interesting, who is the guy telling all this. So for some of you who don't know where Belgium is, it's across the channel, very small country. Something I tell at every lecture abroad, we invented the fries. So French fries, it's nice, the alliteration, but it's wrong. We invented the fries. And besides the fries, we also have beer. You could drink another beer every day of the year, and at the end of the year, you would still not have had all the beers we had in Belgium. So we're a beer country. And this is my thing. I'm a chocoholic, so I'm addicted to chocolate. And there's also very good chocolate in Belgium. So good food, good beer, small country. That's where I'm from. I have a son. In the meantime, he's 19 years old. So for those of you who have children, it's a voyage. I like to play sports. Karate is one of my sports. I suck at it, but I like it a lot. I hope I'm a better firefighter than a karate guy. I like to learn. I like to share. And I have a certain drive. I aim for high. I like excellence. And I think in the fire service, we should excel at what we do. Because if we don't, people die. Civilians or our own people. So excellence is important. Some of my colleagues would say, well, sometimes he's annoying because he's always putting the bar that high.
If you're a regular listener to the podcast, then chances are you are big into your own personal development and the development of firefighters around you. So I wanted to remind you of our mobile app Drill Book. This is a free training and development resources made by firefighters for firefighters. Heading on to Drill Book, you will find incident debriefs, radio messages, knots and lines, quick reference guides, quizzes every single day. We've got useful links to the ERG, to Web Rescue, to Jessup, Euro Rescue, 10-second triage, National Operational Guidance, and not to mention our daily quizzes where you will find questions on extrication, casualty handling, breathing apparatus, fire development, water rescue, rope rescue, you name it. It is the go-to resource if you've got a spare 5 minutes on the firehouse to develop yourself and those around you. Not only that, if you're looking to get into the fire service, we've got advice on there on interview questions, interview answers. You can build your own questioning in there. And again, remember, this is built by firefighters for firefighters, so you can add your own drills in there. You can pick the drills that you find the most favorite. There is literally hundreds of training ideas, hundreds of drills in there. Remember, this app is absolutely free and it grows every single day down to the contributions of our thousands and thousands of users. It's freely available on Android, Apple, and you will find it in the links for this podcast. Remember, it's called personal development. The clue's in the name. You've got to work twice as hard on yourself as you do on the job. So always be growing, always be developing. Now let's get back to the show.
So I work in two different fire services. I work in Brussels, the capital of Belgium, and it used to be the capital of Europe, but you got out of Europe. But I work there. I have been working there for 20 years, but I'm also a volunteer firefighter. I have been a volunteer longer than I'm a career firefighter in the place where I live. Yeah, I train in Belgium and abroad. With John, we've explored the world a bit. I wrote a couple of books, I wrote plenty of articles, and I have a side gig. It's called CFBTBE. We have a team there, and together we train all the Flemish. So Belgium is two parts. The north speaks Dutch, we call it Flemish, and the south of Belgium people speak French. So in the Dutch-speaking part of the country, we train all the fire instructors when it comes to fire behavior and live fire training. This is a picture of a group of people which is called IFIW. It stands for International Fire Instructor Workshop. We meet once per year somewhere in the world. Last year was in Spain, and this picture is from 2015, from the meeting we had in Belgium. And we meet with firefighters, fire instructors, but also scientists, people who are involved in research into firefighting, and we try to exchange. Because the world is changing. I mean, I see young people here, I see also people who look a bit older, and then I make the assumption that they have 20 years plus in the fire service. Those of you have seen the fire service change, right? We do things differently than we do, in my case, 22 years ago. But I see some people, I suspect they're like 30 years in or even 35 years in. Society changes, and it will keep on changing. And one of the things we have to do in the fire service is adapt to that change. I see somebody from London. I mean, Grenfell sucked, right? Yeah, and that's a new problem. Engineers, sometimes they can be assholes. They design stuff and then it doesn't work. And we get to sort out the troubles. Yeah, and they keep on inventing stuff. I suppose most of you have something like this in their pockets, but that generates new problems, right? Other fires, because these batteries, they tend to give problems. And in that group, once a year, we discuss and we have a look. In 2018, we talked one day about Grenfell. What can we learn from this? How do we avoid this? If we have such an incident, how do we deal with it? It's important to exchange and to learn. So for me, this has been, in the past, 14 years, a very important group to learn from. So by trade, I'm a civil engineer. So I think engineers sometimes do stupid things, but I'm an engineer myself. I also have a degree in occupational safety and health. I have another engineering degree in fire safety. So I said, some people think I exaggerate. I do some research myself. I have some publications when it comes to ventilation on the fire ground, search and rescue. I'm now working on a paper into tunnel firefighting. I'm a 5%, I have an appointment only 5% at Ghent University as a professor, and I teach courses about firefighting to fire engineers. I still study, so I enrolled myself back at uni last year as a psychology student, because as an engineer, I know quite some stuff about science and about how nature works. And as a young senior officer, that helped me a lot, because whether you like it or not, fire is physics and chemistry. Fire has to obey rules, and those rules are called physics and chemistry. And the more you know about it, the better you understand it, the better you understand fire. And lots of firefighters, they're not so happy with that point of view. I have some formulas for you in my second presentation, but I try to keep it limited. But I grew throughout the ranks. And the higher you get, the more you have to do with people. And in engineering school, they didn't tell me anything about people. And I realized there's room for improvement. So I enrolled myself as a psychology student, and I'm now learning about humans. Because, where in science 1 + 1 is 2, you all know by experience that if you take this group of people and you put a problem in front of them, there'll be like 10 different solutions, because we all look at the same problem in a different way. And that's also very interesting. This is a hero from my youth. As a kid, I was into judo, and that's a Belgian who was Olympic champion in 1980. And then he taught classes to large groups of people. When he was Olympic champion, you can see how it goes. And he started his class with, "I don't know judo yet." And in hindsight, it's extremely powerful. That's the Olympic champion who just says, "Well, I'm not really good at this." And this goes for me as well. Sean Raffel is one of the authors of 3D, the book that John mentioned. And he said, "I'm only a student with a lot of experience." And I was in his class in 2011. I thought, if you are only a student with a lot of experience, what does that make me? A student with almost no experience? I learned a lot from John and from other guys all around the world. And I think in the fire service, that's of utmost importance, to learn from people and to try to improve things. I don't know much. I think there's way more to learn than I know. But what I do know, I gladly want to share.
Today's podcast is powered by our partner Lifelines and their revolutionary approach to functional hydration. Just like in firefighting, water is essential for body function, but studies show more than 80% of firefighters are dehydrated. A 25-year study findings from the National Institute of Health showed poor hydration to be linked to early aging and chronic disease, and even mild dehydration results in significant negative impact outcomes including headaches, exhaustion, rapid pulse, irritability, and poor cognitive function. A study conducted by Yale University showed that participants who were just 1% dehydrated had a 12% increase in errors when performing tasks that required cognitive flexibility. In addition, dehydration is shown to worsen mood and attitude, contribute to confusion and poor decision making, and negatively affect memory and judgment. In other words, you really don't want your incident commander, firefighter, or for that matter any first responder on a critical scene to be even slightly dehydrated. Mild dehydration occurs when a person is just 1.5% dehydrated, a condition that does not even trigger the thirst response in most people. So just imagine how quickly a firefighter or any first responder can and does become dehydrated in their day-to-day duties, which is why I address my hydration first thing every day with Lifelines. Go into the notes for this episode and specifically check out Lifelines Hydro Fuel and Hydro OG by clicking in the notes for the podcast for a clean energy solution designed for those who demand more from their day. Now back to the show.
An introduction on how the Belgian fire service works. To give you an idea how we roll, this is a map of Belgium. So there is 35 fire and rescue services in Belgium. That's quite recent. Up to 2015, there were 251. So we got an amalgamation in 2015, and now we have 35 services. Overall, there is 12,000 volunteer firefighters. You call them retained or paid on call. So we're not really volunteers, but that's how we call them. We get paid for every hour we work. And there is about 6,000 career firefighters. Yeah. So if I go to the ranks to give you an idea about how they are, so we start as a firefighter and we use the ranks of the army to distinguish ourselves. So one rank above is a corporal. I don't know if you have an according rank. And those are what we call in the army the enlisted ones. So the basic, the guys who will do the work. And then there is the NCOs, the non-commissioned officers, so the company officers, as the Americans would call them. And we have sergeant. Sergeant major is a rank we have retained in Brussels, like in the army. And then we have a rank which we inherited from the French, adjudant. Yeah, it's the highest ranking NCO in a platoon. So typically these guys, they lead like 30, 40 firefighters, and they're responsible for the station. They go to calls as a crew commander, but they also deal with like 30 plus firefighters, their leave, their problems. That's how they roll. And then you have, so that's my rank in my volunteer station. I think it's fun. I get to be crew commander. If there's too much crew commander, I get to be a firefighter. My guys know if I'm on the engine and the back, I have the nozzle if there's a fire. There's no debate about that. Yeah. They had to force me to become a sergeant. I preferred being a firefighter in my volunteer station, doing the fun stuff. And so then the senior officer ranks, you call them senior officers, right? In the UK. So the first one is lieutenant, and then there is captain, major, and colonel. This is my current rank in Brussels. I'm a major. Half of my time, I'm chief of the training department. And yeah, there's in Brussels about 1,150 firefighters, and I'm responsible for their training. And the other half of my time, the chief of one of the 4 companies we have. Yeah, so it keeps me busy. Colonel is a 9-to-5 job, and I still can do some shifts. That's the reason why I'm not a colonel. I've been pushed to go there, but I don't want to because I can't go to fires anymore as a colonel. And in the fire service, it's about going to fires, right? So this is the vehicles we use: command car, our appliance, water tender, and the ladder truck. You will see them throughout the whole of Belgium. They're pretty standard. Yeah, in an appliance, we have 6 persons. So I don't know if that's the case in the UK, but our standard is 6. So we have a pump operator, a driver, a crew commander, which is an NCO, and then 4 guys. That's how a standard appliance, and that's used for a bunch of work: car crashes, fires, people stuck in elevators. We do most of the work with that vehicle. Yeah, and then we have a predetermined attendance at fires of 2 engines, a ladder truck, and a water tender, and a command car. In Brussels, we don't need a water tender, but we send a second ladder truck because everything is mid-rise or high-rise in Brussels. And then you have an incident commander who is a senior officer. So in Belgium, company officers have black lines on their helmets. Senior officers have red lines on their helmets. So that's a bit how it works. So Brussels, 1.2 million people, maybe 400,000 visitors, commuters. So it keeps us busy. It's 7,000 people per square kilometer. Brussels is a small city. So lots of high-rise building. It's the headquarters of NATO is in Brussels. It's the capital of EU, so lots of international institutions. So 1,500 career firefighters, 250 civilian staff. It's in Belgian terms, it's a big organization. Yeah, we have 11 stations and we have 4 companies, which we call 10, 20, 30, and 40. Yeah, so about 250 to 280 firefighters each. And actually, for the moment, I'm in charge of 30th company. So we do both fire work and ambulance work. So all over Brussels, we have 11 engines online. We have about 30 ambulances online, 8 ladder trucks. We have plenty of other specialist vehicles. So this is our headquarters, the bottom picture. Brussels is designed to be capable of dealing with 3 fires simultaneously. So in headquarters, we have 3 engines, 3 ladders, 3 command cars, and they respond to every fire. So the way we deal is the closest station comes, and then headquarters comes as well. Seeing as Brussels is small, in general, the both of them are there fairly quickly. Oostkamp is a whole other ballgame. It's a small municipality just below Bruges, 25,000 people, small countryside. But it's not very visible here, but there is a huge highway going here and there's another one there. So there we have lots of crashes, car crashes, which we don't have in Brussels. So we have 2 stations, 75 firefighters, 3 of whom are career firefighters, all the others are volunteer. So a whole different dynamic, which I think is quite interesting. It's a part of the region, the fire region we call Zone 1. It's not a very creative name, but that's what they picked. So together we protect 500,000 inhabitants. We have 11 stations over that area, about 800 firefighters, of whom 220 are career firefighters. A whole different organization than Brussels. That's my volunteer fire station, and there I get to do the fun stuff, go to fires. So that was my introduction.
The Firefighters podcast was created to recognize, acknowledge, inspire, and hopefully even motivate these incredible individuals who have chosen to be part of the first responder community. Our driving purpose is to create a legacy resource for the current and future generations of firefighters and first responders. We get some incredible feedback from listeners and guests, and as the podcast grows, our desire to create longevity and sustainability means that we are asking for the support of our listeners. If you want to support the podcast, if you want to get discounts to our merchandise, hoodies, clothing, coins, patches, tallies, and also access to all of the incredible documents that get shared with us from our podcast guests and sector leaders, then please head over to our Patreon page, and for just £3 a month, you can support the future of the podcast. Please finally hit that follow, subscribe, or rate button on the platform you're listening, and wherever you're around the world, please support your emergency services responders, and thank you for listening.